Okay, for this next section, I'm just picking up where I left off last time, which was when we're just looking at getting the information about our cognitive service API keys. One good thing that's always to do is to sort of reorientate yourself back to the resource group with all your resources in if you're going to go to the next stage. So to do that, we can click on resource groups. We'll see our Vision Lab resource group available there. Click into that, and we'll see what the contents of that resource group, which at the moment is just going to be this one service, our Vision API cognitive service. So with this as our starting point for this section, what we're going to do is create a database to store all of the data that we're going to be processing. And to do that, we're going to use Azure Cosmos DB. So we can go ahead and click on Create a Resource up in the top left here, just as we did before. This time we need to look into the Databases section. So click into Databases. There's a range of different database technologies available in Azure. The one we're going to use is called Azure Cosmos DB. So we can click on that and we get prompted for a set of information that we need to set up this Cosmos DB account. One of the important things is to give your Cosmos DB account a unique name. So for example, if I pick demo here, I get a red exclamation mark because that's already been taken by someone else. This name has to be unique globally because it's stored in public as a public domain name. So a good tip to name your service would be something like using your initials and then follow it by say Vision Lab, which is the name of the lab that we're going through. You can pick anything you like. The key thing is to make sure that you've got a green tick there, which means that the name you picked is available. The API, Cosmos DB supports multiple APIs, so we're going to actually be using the SQL API here. It's very important that you select SQL there, otherwise nothing else is going to work. For resource group, we're going to select the Vision Lab. The other settings, such as the subscription and location, should be the same as last time, so you shouldn't need to change them. And these other settings down here, we don't need any of these. We can leave them all alone. So the key thing is to put it into a resource group. The API is SQL, and the ID is something unique. Sorry, the account name will be something unique. So go ahead and click on Create. Azure will validate some of the information that we've provided. You'll see deployment in progress up here, and it will start deploying the Cosmos DB. Now this one takes quite a bit longer than the previous resources that were created. It can take 5 to 8 minutes, maybe even 10 minutes to create that resource. One of the things you can see up here is this sort of bell icon and a little blue spinner underneath, which means that we've got some active notifications. So we can see that this deployment is still in progress. So really we kind of have to sit and wait right now, wait for that deployment to finish. We can keep an eye on it by clicking up here. So what I'm going to do is come back to this when this deployment is completed. Okay, I've been patiently waiting here for a few minutes, and eventually Cosmos DB has been deployed. I can see up here this notification saying deployment succeeded, and I can go to the resource from that notification. The way we're going to go is actually go into the resource group, just double check that it's there, come into the Vision Lab, and we can see we have the Cosmos DB account that we just created is now in our resource group. So we can click into it to do some configuration we need to do with the Cosmos DB account. So it's actually detected we haven't got any data, so it's actually directed us into this quick start section where we can start creating collections and connecting our different languages and SDKs to it. We don't need to start there, so it's trying to help us, but it's not much of a help. We're going to start by going into the Data Explorer. So the Data Explorer will let us create the database and the collection to store all of our data. So at the moment, we've got kind of an empty account. So what we can do, we can click on New Collection. This lets us both create the database and the collection in one simple step. So click Create New Collection, and we're prompted for a few pieces of information. So the key thing is to create a new database to store our new collection. So let's call our database MyDB. We'll be referring to this in a few of the other steps, so try and remember what you've called it, or make sure you call it MyDB, because that's what I'm going to call mine. For the collection ID, we're going to call it photos. So we're going to be storing information about photos and images that we're going to gather from the cognitive service. So it makes sense to call our collection photos. Make sure you set the storage capacity to fixed. And in order to store save costs, we're going to reduce the throughput to the minimum that Cosmos DB allows, which is 400 request units per second. So Cosmos DB is priced on these request units. 400 is the minimum that we can specify, which ends up being around 0.7 of a dollar a day, which is pretty cheap. So we can go ahead and click OK. That's going to create that database and that collection for us. Again, this might take a second or two first time. And so now in this Explorer view here, I can see I have a database called MyDB. I have this collection underneath called Photos. And if I expand that out, I can do various operations and management tasks on top of that collection. If I click into Documents, which is where all of our data and records are stored, we don't have anything, which is fine. You know, we're going to be putting stuff in there a little bit later, but it's just good to know how to go and check what's inside your collection. So that's the first thing we need to do. The second thing is to get some connection details to be able to connect to this Cosmos DB. And we do that by coming down to this keys section in the left-hand side. So there's quite a long menu down here under a Cosmos DB account. You'll see the keys section somewhere in the middle. Click into keys, and you should be given a page full of details, which we're going to make note of in our notepad, as we did a bit before with the computer vision API. So the first thing that we need is the URL, the endpoint of our instance, and we can use these little blue copy buttons to grab the information and put them in our notepad. So let's make a note of these. Cosmos DB details. And we're going to need the key. So what's our key? We can pick the primary or secondary. It doesn't really matter. Let's pick the primary key. See, it's a slightly different format from the Vision API. So we'll need those details again later on once we're connecting up to this Cosmos. So that's all we need to do for now. We've created the Cosmos DB account, we've created a database, and we've created a collection. We're in quite a good place to kick on with the next stage.